Good day and welcome to the sixth edition of the SASI Debate Challenge. This battleground of intellect is brought to you by Say What with support from the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe. I am your debate mistress, Nicole Natsaj Manicaland, also known as .co.nicole. Let the games begin. Before I read out the motions, I will ask our four teams to introduce themselves, starting from my far right, going all the way to my far left. Podium 1.
My name is Tando Spanda and I'm from MSU.
My name is Denzel and I'm from MSU.
My name is Gerald Chichta. I'm from SWAS.
My name is Courtney Tadiwa Nashe Jongwe. I'm from Manicaland State University of Applied Sciences.
My name is Mary Ann Nazombe, and I'm from the National University of Science and Technology.
I am Jimmy Sanim Loy from the National University of Science and Technology.
My name is Koslat Nkala and I am from the University of Zimbabwe.
My name is Nicole Mushore and I am from the University of Zimbabwe.
Those are our teams, and the motion reads: This House believes that drug and substance abuse should be treated as a public health concern instead of a criminal justice issue. I shall repeat. This House believes that drug and substance abuse should be treated as a public health concern rather than a criminal justice issue. Moving on to our opening government. Prime Minister, the floor is yours. Make your case.
Panel, we have to understand the evolution in drug addiction and the evolution in drug use. We think that individuals today no longer use drugs such as mbanje. We think that individuals today use drugs such as polish or drugs such as boiling pampers and getting drugs and all chasing that particular high that we have in today's debate. We think that the deterrence that exists in criminal justice systems does not niche down to how exactly we rehabilitate these individuals, how exactly we stop this drug use that exists in society, right? We think that this innovation that exists in drug abuse and drug addiction ought to be particularly handled by the public health or health institutions such as Ngujen hospitals or such as health institutions that offer rehabilitation to individuals that suffer from such issues. It looks like individuals that try to solve their mental health issues through drugs. It looks like so many underlying issues that individuals have in order for them to access drugs. It looks like someone who's sad, someone who even has mental issues, right? We think that we ought to unpack those particular reasons and rehabilitate them. We don't get that in the criminal justice system that exists in Zimbabwe, right? Three things that we are going to prove in today's debate is how best we rehabilitate these individuals. Secondly, who's the best actor, and lastly, where do we get marginal utility for these people, right? Argument number one, we think that we value the rehabilitation of drug users. We think that the criminal justice system that exists in Zimbabwe, particularly, only just puts people in prison. There is no therapist that exists in the particular prison. There's no whatsoever rehabilitation that unpacks and unravels why that particular individual is using drugs, right? We think that there is no ultimate change in society in terms of formulating these particular things that exist, right? And we think that, Mr. Speaker, when the general charge that the criminal justice system does is to arrest someone and put them in prison, right? It does not take care of their withdrawal symptoms. It does not redress how particularly that drugs harm them in the individual, and it then releases them to society. We think that it creates a perpetual cycle of drug usage or drug addiction, right? Secondly, we think that there was also an inefficiency that exists in the criminalization of this thing, right? We think that we ought to understand how in society criminalizing things is not enough. We think that child marriages in Zimbabwe are criminalized, but they still exist in society. Where at a point in time when you shift it from a criminal justice issue to public health, it means that you unpack all these underlying issues and you redress these situations that exist in society, right? Secondly, we don't value the cycle of arresting an individual and then arresting them, putting them in prison and then releasing them. We think that we don't get the ultimate goal of ending drug abuse or ending addiction that exists in Zimbabwe, right? That exists in Zimbabwe, that exists in this particular society. That's why we think that we ought to do this. How does this model particularly look like? It looks like the police, or it looks like people in their families going to somehow arresting this particular individual, but not putting them to the court system, but sitting them over to the jurisdiction of mental health institutions, because we think that these individuals have the capacity to unpack or unravel the key issues that exist in terms of drug abuse and all these things in today's debate, right? Tanda's gonna niche down on the argument, how then do we end the stigma on drug abuse when we do not criminalize that particular thing, this particular phenomenon? Because we think that criminalization in its very own instance has connotations of stigma, because criminals are viewed as bad people that exist in society. Drug users are already stigmatized in society. So at a point in time when you view them as criminals, you further you further exclude them. You further do not create like reparations or exclusion for these individuals that are already excluded in society that does not appreciate drug users. We think that we value a world when we unpack how and why people take drugs, so that we engage people that are now using polishes drugs, or people that are using over-the-counter drugs as things to chase a high.
That was the Prime Minister of the opening government. We will now hear from the opening opposition. Leader of opposition, please, the floor is yours. Make your case.
Panel, this side of the House does not believe that drug and substance abuse should not be treated as a health concern instead of a criminal justice issue. When the government came and gave us their proposition, they told us that in the jails, people do not have activities that support their mental health, of which it is wrong. When people are incarcerated, there are activities that are put in place to ensure that the activities that are put in place to ensure that their mental health is also taken into consideration. They are not just called jails, but they're also called correctional centers. So we are not just punishing, but we are also giving them an opportunity to redeem themselves in a suitable manner. In this debate panel, we are going to do two things. Number one, show you why drug and substance abuse cannot be treated as a public concern. And number two, show you why drug and substance abuse should actually be a criminal justice issue. Here are a list of reasons why drug and substance abuse cannot be a public health concern. Number one, lack of funding. Even if they were to propose the case that we have rehabilitation centers, do they have enough money to ensure that the rehabilitation centers are actually effective to cure the substance abuse that we are going through as a nation? And the second point is lack of enforcement. A public health approach may focus on prevention and treatment rather than enforcement, which will lead to perception that drug and substance abuse is being condoned in our society, which is something that we are not supporting as a house. And finally, there is lack of accountability. The moment we start treating drug and substance abuse as a public health concern, it means that individuals who engage in drug and substance abuse are not held accountable for their actions. And we as a delegation believe that if someone does something, they should indeed be held accountable for their action. Now, what is our solution as the opposing government? We are saying that we need to lay down grounds on which we can propose to say that this behavior can be classified to be a criminal justice issue. And a behavior can be considered a criminal justice issue if one, it is illegal under the law, and two, if it causes harm to the individual and the people that are involved. So the questions that arise may be, number one, is drug and substance abuse illegal? Yes, it is, according to the Dangerous Drug Act, Chapter 15.2, the Criminal Law and the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act, Chapter 9.23. Drug and substance abuse is deemed illegal. And this act classifies drugs into different schedules and penalties for possessions, use, and sale, as well as trafficking of drugs and other substances. The second question now will be, does drug and substance abuse cause harm? Well, that is not a secret. Drug and substance abuse is an undisputed correlation between violence and drug and substance abuse. Recent clinical and community studies have actually proved that there is a well-established correlation between drug and violence. In clinical studies, people who abuse drugs are more likely to engage in violence behaviors compared to people who are not abusing drugs. In community studies, research has actually proven that neighborhoods with higher rates of usage of drugs have higher chances of violence. Thank you.
That was the leader of opposition. At this point in time, we will take a short break and we'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the 6th edition of the SASI Debate Challenge. This is the Speak and Solve initiative brought to you by SAYWHAT with support from the Swedish Embassy. At this juncture, I would like to remind our participants that as you talk amongst yourselves, please move the mic. Move the mic away so that the other team will not be able to hear the secrets that you're talking amongst yourselves. And we move on to the opening government deputy prime minister. Please, the floor is yours. Come and make your case.
Panel, the most important thing to understand in this debate is how dire the situation it is when it comes to drug abuse. The lengths that people are willing to go to just to chase that specific high. Opening government has already spoken to you about how people go to the length of getting polished, for example, just to chase the high, boiling pampers and what have you not. This shows us the urgency and how the current status quo has failed to cater to all these needs, has failed to cater to all this damage that has been caused by drug abuse in essence. So what do we get from opening opposition? Opening opposition talks about how public health sector does not have the capacity or enough money to deal with drug abuse in essence. We'll tell you that both sides of the house do have limitations, yes, but we do think that the public health sector is in a better position to cater to these needs because they are designed and structures to cater to the drivers that drive people towards taking drugs or indulging or whatever. We'll tell you that a person who's abusing drugs is in a better position to get help when they are admitted to Ingojini, for example, as opposed to when they are thrown into jail at correctional services, as they would claim. We think that the criminal justice system's mandate, their objective is primarily to punish people and not necessarily to answer to the whys and the hows that drove them to that specific act. And we do think that in as much as drug abuse to a degree could be regarded as a crime, but we don't think that it's something that can be best addressed in a situation where you are punished and that particular holding is for you to be punished and not to cater to the whys and the reasons why you find yourself in that particular situation to begin with. So we'll talk to you about how we value wellness over deterrence in this world, and this is why. Firstly, we kind of feel like in a world where deterrence is valued, what you do is simply instill fear in individuals, and the decision to not take drugs is driven by fear, not necessarily the understanding of the harms and the damage that comes with indulging in drug abuse. So in a world where that element of fear is taken away, which we feel like is the world we live in right now, people are likely to still go into the streets and indulge in drugs and abuse those drugs. In a world where the other factors that drive people to abusing drugs are not catered to, people will still continuously either go back to jail and come out and still go back into the streets. And the reason why we would value a world where there's wellness over deterrence is because in a wellness kind of setup, we kind of feel like somebody is made aware of the effect of drug abuse, for example, first of all. And secondly, we kind of feel like in a world where wellness is valued over deterrence, people are prepared or sort of like treated and sort of like the drivers of that particular issue that makes them consume those drugs is better catered to. And secondly, we'll talk about stigma. By virtue of criminalizing drug abuse, we kind of feel like we disqualify individuals from being part of a society normally and benefit from the things that normal individuals of society benefit from. Because when you criminalize someone, we sort of isolate them, and that closes the door of potential conversations of what's going on in your life. Why do you find yourself going to a store to buy all of these things just to chase that high? We kind of feel like in a world where it's criminalized, that stigma deters people who are even willing to stop consuming drugs, who are even willing to like get out of that very deep and dark hole and to get help and move forward. So we do feel like deterrence has been ineffective because we still do have an increasing drug consumption is still very much increasing. People are still flooding the streets to kind of get high and all of these things. So we do feel like deterrence has failed, and that's why the jurisdiction has to shift from the criminal justice system to the public health system. And this means that we're not completely eliminating the policing aspect. Police will still do their rounds and bombard, do drug busts and all sorts of things. But when people are then incarcerated, they'll be transferred to these mental health institutions where they are in a better position to get help and stop using drugs to begin with.
That was the Deputy Prime Minister. Moving right on to the Deputy Leader of Opposition. The floor is yours. Make your case.
So, this House believes that should drugs and substance abuse be taken as a public health concern instead of a criminal justice issue? A firm no from the Deputy Speaker of the Opposition. So, we've structured our debate into reasons for not classifying drug and substance abuse as public health concern, and structured also our debate into reasons for classifying drug and substance abuse as a criminal justice issue. So, we've come to you, panel, stating that drugs and substance abuse should not be classified as a public health concern. Reason due to the fact that it's expensive. It's still an early day research. There is lack of enforcement and lack of accountability. There's also lack of funding. Whereby we are saying that is the legislation. We indeed believe that there is lack of accountability. The current status and the current statistics, the government current statistics are usually lower than those at the ground. So we're stating that as a delegation. We know that if there is lack of accountability, there's also lack of enforcement. So we're saying that as a delegation. We do really believe that we should classify drug and substance abuse as a criminal justice issue rather than a public health concern. Whereby we're saying that as a delegation. We do believe that we classify an issue as a criminal justice issue when it is legal under law, whereby it's proven by Chapter 15.2, and it's deemed harmful not only to the individual, but to the society as a whole, whereby we see that drugs are harmful to the society due to the fact that it's associated with violence. There is correlation between drugs and violence, whereby we think that is the legislation. We all know so the fact that there are limitations with rehabilitation centers. Limited people from, especially those from urban areas, are the ones that are accessing rehabilitation centers, neglecting those people in the rural areas. There's also an issue of lack of sufficient funds, and we have seen that there are also other weaknesses of rehabilitation associated, denied. There is also weaknesses of rehabilitation according to the American study, which states that there are less than 42% of those entering rehabilitation are finishing it. We've also seen that successful in treatment depends on the fact that the person comes from a criminal background. There's also a contribution from the family and social environment that it goes to after therapy. So we are saying we know that as human beings we are reluctant to change, and we are saying that as delegation we rather believe that these factors are affecting the success in treatment based on rehabilitation centers. With this, we are crushing their points. They come to the podium and stated that. Take it.
Individuals with substance abuse disorders often relapse because underlying root causes are not addressed. So do you intend to subject these citizens to arrest and re-arrest indefinitely?
We are saying that as a delegation. We are saying we are rehabilitating. We are rehabilitating on the basis that in correctional service centers there is rehabilitation, which is our crushing point for those that we value rehabilitation. For the point that they came and stated that we value rehabilitation drug consumers, whereby we're saying that as delegation. Prisoners have therapies around the world, especially in America, in Europe. Prisoners have correctional centers where people are given therapy. It's not only in the rehabilitation centers where therapy is given. So they also came and stated there's inefficiency in criminalizing drug consumers, whereby we're saying that as a delegation on its own rehabilitation is failing to meet with this. I thank you.
That was the Deputy Leader of Opposition. At this juncture, we will take a short break and we will be back with more. Welcome back to the 6th edition of the SASI Debate Challenge. This is the Speak and Solve initiative brought to you by SAYWHAT with support from the Swedish Embassy. We have heard from the first half of our debate teams, which is the opening government as well as the opening opposition. We will now move on to the closing government. I call upon the member of government to come and make his or her case.
Panel, a lot of what was said in opening opposition is not contentious. We don't think we disagree that it is illegal for a person to take drugs, but we think that is the problem that we ought to address. First of all, we don't think it is good for state and governance to divorce state systems from the people that it seeks to serve. We think that mental health characterization was very poor from opening government because we don't think individuals just wake up one day and think, oh, I want to get on a high. We think that youths in this country face unemployment. They face daily issues that harm their mental health on each and every day. And because, first of all, the current health system that exists is not enough to counter the mental health challenges that they are facing, we therefore need an evolution in the healthcare system, and we need mainstreaming of specific aspects that are deemed illegal. That is why, first of all, we think amendments to laws exist, and we don't think the criminal justice system should be a demonic entity that attacks the people that it ought to serve, right? Proud to propose. First of all, we think that prevalence of mental health issues in Zimbabwe, it is very high, right? We think that with its highness, right, we don't think Ngutsheni has got enough facilities to bring everyone into counseling. So what do the boys in Makokoba do? First of all, they can't even afford to seek for medication. So they go to the nearest drug dealer and get the drugs, right? So because when they get the drugs, they get that immediate form of relief. They then go back for more each and every day, right? How do we address this problem? We don't think incarceration or even involving the police at the very least or the courts is something that will solve these problems, right? We rather think that state should characterize what people are going through and then use the healthcare service to address the wrongs, right? First of all, we think that the healthcare service cares about the well-being of individual, and because the healthcare sector cares about the well-being of individual, we think that their mental health is just as important, so we vie for its evolution, right? We think that its evolution of the healthcare or medical sector looks like it appreciating concerns and immediate remedies that people take to like immediately feel their relief that they are going through. So this looks like the mainstreaming of drugs that are previously not accepted, right? We think that it looks like the medical system going out there, finding out what Mtoriro people are using, carrying out scientific research and trying to standardize the intake of these drugs in order to improve their mental health, right? That's what we're vying for. We're vying for a medical fraternity that evolves and that mainstream solution in order for their regulation and for their management, in order of the management of mental health, right? We think the criminal justice system does not do its scientific research. We think what the criminal justice system does, it first of all legalizes and puts a homogeneous mark on what is good or bad, something that we regret from side closing, right? We think that we do not appreciate the homogeneity of laws, right? Especially when it comes to mental health, right? We think that mental health issues are so complex and individuals are so complex. We don't think we want the homogeneity from the criminal justice system to matter in like mental health issues, right? We think that we should evolve and move on, right? So laws that engage on on drug abuse should not be prioritized in this instance, right? What do we think that what do you think what we're advocating for specifically looks like, right? We think that when something is criminalized, you sort of like institutionalize the issue. You make the conversation of drugs to be about the police and reporting people who are misfits within society. But we think if the healthcare system appreciates those concerns and issues and deals with them, you have effective health education designing, you have effective policy implementation, and you have a trickle down of mental health conversations within society, something that we value. We think the amount of discourse that comes from public health is better than the amount of discourse that comes from uniformed forces, so we value it when it comes to mental health, right? So also secondly, we think that even accessibility of the healthcare system is better because healthcare individuals are well trained to deal with like communities and bring about non-traditional issues in order for them to be dealt with compared to uniformed forces and the legal structure. In this case, we value the healthcare system taking care of mental health. Thanks.
That was indeed the member of government making her case. We will be moving on to the closing opposition. Member of opposition, the stage is yours.
Panel, we think within like public health systems, like the conversation around drugs exists on a spectrum which has been ignored. We think on one side, they actively demonize the use of drugs and say, we think people ought to be rehabilitated and taken into clinics, and this is solved. But then on the other end of the spectrum that has been ignored throughout the debate is they actively affirm the use of these drugs because they think, oh, well, they solve such and such mental disorders. We think we get this in countries like America, where like the use of marijuana has been actively legalized because it actively deals with certain mental health disorders, right? We think like the vast majority of instances that we've gotten like throughout the debate has been to like actively address the impact of the use of drugs, but we've gotten nothing exclusive in terms of how like the public health system deals with these, right? Because we're told that the criminal justice system in and of itself is not just a body that seeks to like punish people. We think it has got 4 fundamental pillars. It deters these individuals. It participates in retributive justice. It doesn't just punish the individual that's taking the drug, but it punishes the individual that is giving you the drug that you're consuming, right? But that we think we still have systems of rehabilitation existing within like the criminal justice system. But the reason why we value our rehabilitation is because it goes as far as taking these prisoners and putting them in workshops and getting them into things like plumbing and getting them into kitchens where they are cooking. We think we actively address the core issue, which like closing government talks about when they talk about things such as unemployment. The problem we have with the public health system is it's going to take you and address the impact of like the addiction. It's going to take you and it's going to address like what has happened to you, like your mental capacity, but it's not going to dig deep to address the reason why these individuals are being like addicts, right? But the fourth pillar of the CJS is like closure speaker that exists, right? We think like within like the CJS, people get the closure that like these individuals have no possibility of re-offending again, right? We think we best achieve these kind of systems when we've got an incentive to actively deal with the people that are in the streets giving these drugs to like these individuals. We think you don't get that sort of like mechanization on side like on government side, right? So why do we think like then it's important in this debate to talk about like the medical health, the public health system as a system that affirms the use of drugs? Like 2 things. One, why we think like meaningful discourse about why drugs are so harmful cannot exist in its most meaningful form. What does this actively mean? We think it means that in the vast majority of instances where you're trying to demonize drugs, you're trying to demonize things like marijuana from being on the street, but we've still got like pharmacies that are actively marketing the very same marijuana and distributing it into the very same streets. We think there's a conflict of interest that exists in that type of discourse because we've got like marketing boards and companies actively affirming this and like wanting it to exist in like so much in society, but we've also got these activists saying no, we don't think that this ought to exist. So we think the conversation that exists around like use of drugs becomes like very conflicted and people become confounded and we don't actively like come to like a decision as to whether or not drugs should exist in society. But secondly, we think like what you do when you like engage with the criminal justice system is you don't just engage the individual using the drugs. We think you directly engage the capitalists who have monopolized mental health. We think within the public health system, the issue of mental health is a system that seeks to feed individuals that are like marketing most of these drugs. Right? We think it has become more about making money from people that have like from people that are depressed, from people that have like bipolar than it is about actively engaging the problems that exist in the public health system. Panel, we think like this debate should like exist in a space where we can actively disincentivize, but most importantly, regulate the use of like these drugs that exist. On our side of the world, and why we think it's extremely exclusive, is because we have an incentive, even if our side is like failed, right? 2 things. One, because the alternative is so much worse off because it does not engage the core problem, it does not work. But in a world where our CJS does not exist, we think it's so much worse off, speaker, because you don't have an incentive to establish policies that at least attempt to catch these individuals or like ban the use of these drugs. We think you vote opposition in this debate.
That was indeed the member of opposition at this diplomatically heated point in the argument. We will take a short break. Stay tuned and we will be back with more. Welcome back to the 6th edition of the SASI Debate Challenge. This is the Speak and Solve initiative brought to you by SAYWHAT with support from the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe. At this point, participants, beware. The mic is yours. So rightfully yours that it will expose your beautiful voice to the audience, but also expose your secrets to your opponents. So please, put it to the side when you are divulging your secrets to your partners. We are now at the last quarter of our debate, and I will ask the government whip to come through and make their case.
the frenzied hysteria that has been whipped up by the opposition is that people with substance abuse disorders should be held accountable due to these problems and should be thrown in jail. Yet they fully chose to turn a blind eye to the sobering truth that several of these citizens are poor, hungry youth who are seeking to escape reality, women who seek to instant relief from grief and loss, and the elderly who have suffered silently and seek medical mental well-being. To maintain sanity, integrity, and honor in this society, we should not compromise offering healthcare and empathy for legal advantage. That would be morally wrong. So we will be sorry indeed, I believe, that to lock up adolescents and young adults who, as a result of self-prescription of sedatives, have developed an addiction that has altered their behavior. So in this case, we are saying it is therefore necessary to abandon forthwith the arbitrary claims that drug and substance abuse should be treated as a criminal justice issue. Now, the first pillar that I shall reiterate as closing gov is that we should, as government, we should approach this in a humanitarian way. We feel retribution as a primary discourse is wrong before explaining the problem, solving this problem in other ways. So now, how do we tackle this? You will realize that the humanitarian approach seeks to often look at the root cause, the complex factors that cause these problems. First, we have trauma, mental health, and socioeconomic disparities that we seek. So the goal is to seek an escape from reality. Now, also, we should look at the cost effectiveness of incarceration or using these criminal justice issues. Now, the former alternative is better than the latter in terms of cost effectiveness, because arresting, prosecuting, and the cost of litigation leading to arrest will be expensive. Now, treating people with drug abuse problems will cause and support recovery. First, we are saying we will reduce recidivism, where people get arrested and rearrested for that same problem. Secondly, incarceration or addressing this as a criminal injustice will not address the underlying root causes. We will be bringing forth these drugs like marijuana into the market, and that they are available in pharmacies. But these are the very same capitalists who are peddling these drugs to the detriment of our systems. So now, as we want to now look at an source that encourages a shift in societal attitude, where we create an inclusive community and an environment. In essence, we cherish the ideal where citizens will get basic public health, and we forge a nation that prioritizes the welfare of its citizens before throwing them behind bars. Finally, positive community impact addresses these issues holistically, because compassion and support within the community is more important than throwing people behind bars. Thank you.
That was indeed the government whip. This is the last speaker coming up right now, which is the closing whip from the opposition. Please make your way and make your case.
Panel, at the core of the issues that we had to discuss today, the main thing we're supposed to prove here, I believe, was which is a more effective way of dealing with the current drug pandemic that we have, right? We don't really get that on the opening half of this debate, because at the end of the day, we are really torn between what does opening government want? Wellness versus deterrence. On the opening opposition side as well, what are they really here to talk about? Are they just here to address the expense and the accountability that is lacking in the medical health system, right? So then we come in this half of the debate. What does a closing government come and say? Closing government come and say that, well, we believe that there's health facilities that are in place to address these things, right? We come to you then and we say, well, these health facilities are currently failing due to the large influx of the drug addicts that we have, right? So we believe that if a system like the health system is already failing, not just on the drug aspect, aspect, but also just dealing with the cases that they already have. Why then are we entrusting these people with the lives of the young people in our society, right? They also come and they say, well, we want to mainstream drugs. We want to say that, well, all of you can do drugs or whatever, but we're going to make sure you can get it in a pharmacy. What that then does, ladies and gentlemen, is it affirms the drug use and probably strengthens the drug problem that exists in our society, right? Which is the problem that we're trying to break, right? They also come here and they say, well, the healthcare system is more accessible. We come to you and we say, well, accessibility does not give that place ability to be able to deal with the problem, right? So we come to you and then what we do is we contextualize exactly what the criminal justice system means, right? We give you the 4 pillars of the criminal justice system and how we believe those, given a proper chance, are effective in dealing with the current problem we have, right? We come to you and we tell you that beyond rehabilitation, we are equipping people with skills that help them go into the world and deal with the problems that brought them to us in the first place, right? They come in, they say, well, unemployment and depression. We tell you that we already have counseling and now we have hard skills training, technical skills training, which puts them in the SMEs, which is the industries that are carrying our country, right? We come to you also and we say, when dealing with an issue like drugs, you don't just deal with the effects of the drugs. I don't just come and say, well, I want to stop Nicole from being high. I want to come to you as a side and say that we want to stop Nicole from ever feeling like she needs to take the drugs in the first place, right? We also come to you and say that the health system, based on its track record, has failed dismally. But then the justice system in itself still has a chance to prove to us, which is why we're advocating for it, how it can help the people, right? We also come to you and we say that, as Nkosi said, right, that generally they're arguing that the status quo, the justice system, has failed, right? We put it to you that because of the 4 pillars that exist in the justice system, were we to affirm those pillars, right, we would then have a justice system that is effective for dealing with this problem. But not only from stopping Nicole from taking drugs, no, but also finding the Mary Ann that is selling Nicole the drugs, right? So what is that? One stone, many big entities that we need to rid our society of, right? They also come here and they say that, well, we think that if we have a point in which we are comparing this, comparing the justice system and the health system, then we have sort of a solution, right? We come to you and say that by contradicting these 2 forces, you remove any room for discourse, right? So what we want, ladies and gentlemen, is a world in which we can all actively speak about the drug problem, not only speak about it, find its root cause, and then be able to then develop a solution to this drug problem, right? With this, we are proud to oppose.
That was heated. At this juncture, we will take a short break. Stay tuned and we'll be back with more. Welcome back to the 6th edition of the SASI Debate Challenge. That is the Speak and Solve initiative brought to you by Say What with support from the Swedish Embassy. Podium on, how are you feeling?
We are very anxious.
Anxious? Mukunzika kuchachengwa in the background. Exactly. Podium 2, how are you feeling?
So we are proud and we are confident.
You're proud and confident. No nerves at all.
No,
Why?
we believe in ourselves.
Belief in themselves. Do you also believe in yourselves, Podium 3?
Don't know.
No?
I'm unsure.
What do you mean you're not sure? Do you feel as if you acted as prepared as you were?
I think so, but I also think that the round was very interesting, so it's a little bit difficult to be like sure.
It's a little bit difficult. Yes, Podium 4. How are you feeling?
We just want to get the results. That's how we're feeling.
You just want the results now. Now. Immediately. All right. Do you feel as if the time was enough to say whatever you wanted to say, or did you need more time?
We'd have preferred the whole day, but we'll work.
The whole day? Is that how you like your rounds?
Yes. Preferably.
Preferably the whole day.
Preferably.
Wow. Round 3, Podium 3, that's how you also like your rounds? The whole day?
Definitely satisfying.
Satisfying. Lovely, lovely. Podium 2. What drugs are at your institution?
We have medicinal drugs,
Medicinal drugs. Which
Yes.
ones are those?
like the paracetamols, amoxicillins, the ones that are like given over the counter.
Ah, so there's none of the other stuff.
That, the other stuff we're working to make sure that it doesn't exist. As peer educators, that's our job.
That okay, as a peer educator, that's your job. Podium 1. What drugs do you have at your school that you know of? What drugs do you have at your school that you know of? Guka. And what's the English term for guka?
Crystal meth.
Crystal meth. Have you taken it before?
I'm willing to try.
You're willing, you're willing to try. Willing to try. Yes, this is still the SASI debate challenge, which is the term coming from the Shona term masasi, which means to conversate or to chat. I will now ask the adjudicators to come through with their results as well as their comments.
All right, thank you so much for that lovely debate. We thought it was very, very engaging. I must tell you that even as I'm standing here, the call was not unanimous. We disagreed a lot on that particular call. But on a 2-1 split, the call for this round was in first position, University of Zimbabwe. In second position, NAST. In third position, MSU. And in fourth position, Manicaland State University. So it's CO, CG, OG, opening opposition. Okay. So I'll do my best to try and give the type of justification that caters for all the adjudicators, right? So what we hear from opening government is that we think the drug use industry in itself and the drug users are getting very innovative. We have a lot of new drugs. People are going over the counter. People are going Pampers and even Polish, right? And we think there's some sort of agency to act now. And we think the status quo has failed because they treat this issue as a criminal justice system issue and particularly not a public health issue. And we think there's more rehabilitation in the system that prioritizes treating this as a public health issue than a system that treats this as a criminal issue. What we hear from opening opposition is that well, it's illegal, and so people should take some sort of accountability and people should be incarcerated. And we still think rehabilitation happens because prisoners usually have activities and it's a correctional facility. And what you prioritize the most is that firstly, things that are considered illegal should be treated just as that, and that these people should get some sort of recourse, and you want some sort of accountability from the system.
All cases having been made and the deliberations having been delivered, that is it of the 6th edition of the SASI Debate Challenge, brought to you by Say What with support from the Swedish Embassy. I am your debate mistress, Nicole Manikire, also powerfully known as .co.nicole. Until next time.